Had a very good relationship with the Saskatoon police over this past couple of weeks, and they've been very cooperative in working with us, and I'd like to I do appreciate that. So I want to send a shout out, because I know that quite often the protesters and police bang up against each other, and we don't need to. We don't need to go up against the police. They should be on our side.
About the police, but I was with Splitting the Sky, the Mohawk activist who approached the police in Calgary, one of the most brave acts censored by the media, and told them that they were complicit with crimes against humanity and war crimes, and attempted a citizen's arrest. He was told by the Orwellian committee, I have to dissent against this, I'm sorry, that he was too radical and that 9/11 Truth was too radical for this event. And so I think it is a disgrace that an Indigenous person is told by the committee that he wasn't welcome here. And, you know, I passed that message on from Tony Hall, from Splitting the Sky, from people who initiated Bush's first visit to a foreign country was Calgary, that well-known centre for activism, you know, Calgary, Alberta, right? Like, and we were there, and he attempted a citizen's arrest, and, you know, he was told he wasn't welcome here, so just to let you know.
From Toronto to Saskatoon, the unelected apparatchiks of the Canadian peace movement played an integral role in censoring the story about the man who attempted a citizen's arrest on Bush from the public consciousness.
They wouldn't allow me to speak in Toronto because of my 9/11 affiliation. They wouldn't allow it in Saskatoon because of my 9/11 affiliation. But yet, the great socialist leader, Hugo Chavez, said 9/11 was an inside job.
Fortunately, Splitting the Sky was embraced by a significant number of activists who splintered away from the police-sanctioned protesters. Many of Splitting the Sky's allies were members of the 9/11 Truth movement. Such people provided alternative platforms to the police-sanctioned podiums.
Please welcome the man who tried to arrest George W. Bush in Calgary, March 17th. The government refuses to arrest known war criminals according to the Constitution and the Canadian Criminal Code and the National Criminal Code. That is an inherited right of civilians to make the arrest under what is known as civil.
Well, actually, they were RCMP in suits and security.
Tortured, maybe killed. I warned and asked the RCMP to arrest George Bush. They would not arrest him. I said, if you don't arrest him on the third time I come, I intend to go in there and make a citizen's arrest. Now, on that day, they said that they would not, on the third attempt, they would not arrest him. I then proceeded, I broke the line. When I broke the line, I went through, I was apprehended, thrown to the ground. I was smashed, my head was smashed into the cement. My glasses were broke, I was handcuffed, and I was
question of whether the credibly accused war...
While Canadian citizens who realised the implications of Bush's visit to Canada and Splitting the Sky's subsequent attempts to arrest the credibly accused war criminal did their best to publicise the historic events domestically, Professor Hall took the news global when he travelled to Paris to take part in an event called Vers la Vérité. Vers la Vérité brought together scholars, professors, activists, scientists, and concerned citizens, all of whom wished to bring forth evidence that the official story of 9/11 was unbelievable. Among those who attended was former MI5 agent Annie Machon, former US Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, Niels Harrit of the University of Copenhagen, just to name a few of those who constituted this axis of enlightenment. Once Cynthia McKinney was informed about Splitting the Sky's actions by Professor Hall in Paris, the genie was out of the bottle. Soon after her visit to Paris, Ms. McKinney took part in an international conference in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The conference set out the ostensible goal to criminalize war. During her speech, Cynthia McKinney let the world know about Splitting the Sky's bravery.
Unfortunately, under tremendous pressure from the rich and the guilty, Spain is in the process of changing its universal jurisdiction laws, and that removes that venue that was available for the people to get even a hearing. So rather than survey the juridical landscape with despair, Some have gone one step further and attempted to serve warrants on the obviously guilty in their capacity as citizens. One such individual is John Boncour, also known as Splitting the Sky. Splitting the Sky is a Mohawk member of the American Indian movement that was targeted by the United States government in its infamous and illegal counterintelligence program known as COINTELPRO. On March 17th, which just happens to be my birthday, Splitting the Sky gave me a present. He was arrested in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, where he tried to serve a citizen's warrant for the arrest of President George W. Bush, who had been invited to Canada to give a speech. Splitting the Sky has asked me to testify at his March 2010 trial, and I intend to be there. In the advent of this war on terror, it is clear that governments are straying far away from the wishes of the very people who elect them.
George Galloway gave a speech from the same podium as Miss McKinney in Kuala Lumpur. I spoke with him on his national radio show to discuss Splitting the Sky's March 2010 trial.
Greatest hits. Now, they're coming in from far and wide. Joshua, in Alberta, in Canada, is joining the great debate here on TalkSport, and we're very glad about that. Joshua, sorry to have kept you waiting.
It's not a problem, George. How are you?
I'm very well. Tell me, what's your take on all this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I saw your speech in Kuala Lumpur, and did you notice that Cynthia mentioned the upcoming trial of Splitting the Sky, who's the Mohawk activist, my friend and colleague?
Indeed, yes. In Calgary. Yes, I do. That just goes to show that history has not ended. The American natives, including your friend Splitting the Sky, are still fighting back.
Despite the Canadian media's censorship of news about the trial, which many dubbed the trial of Splitting the Sky versus George W. Bush, by the time the March 8th court date came along, there were many global citizens who were eagerly following the events as they unfolded in Calgary. On the morning of the trial, CBC Radio finally invited Professor Hall on to explain to Canadians the importance of this trial. Until this moment, no mainstream media had offered Canadians information about this seminal event.
This is the Monday Eye-Opener. Good morning, I'm Jim Brown. A First Nations activist who was arrested last March while protesting at a rally against the former U.S. President George W. Bush is due in court today. We will find out about his defense 12 minutes past 7 o'clock. That was the sound outside the TELUS Convention Center in Calgary last March. Former U.S. President George W. Bush was in town for a speech. Splitting the Sky was also there. He's a First Nations activist who says Bush is a war criminal. He confronted police outside the convention center and demanded they arrest the former president. Instead, he himself was arrested and charged with obstructing a police officer. His trial gets underway today. One of Splitting the Sky's supporters, who will be sitting in the courtroom today, is Anthony Hall. He's a professor of globalization studies at the University of Lethbridge and the author of The American Empire and the Fourth World. And he joins me in the studio now. Good morning.
Good morning, James.
Thanks for coming in. Now, let me ask you, first of all, why did Splitting the Sky confront police officers at the TELUS Convention Center? What did he want them to do?
Yeah, I noticed in your introduction earlier you said that his protest was against George Bush. No, it was against Canadian law enforcement officials. We were responding to an incredibly accused war criminal, why he fulfills certain criteria in the Immigration and Refugee Act, and especially in the Canadian Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act, an act passed in 2000 with the view that Canada should not be a haven concerning Abu Ghraib, Bagram, Guantanamo Bay, Omar Khadr, I could mention, child soldiers. There's an overwhelming body of documented opinion and legal opinion that George Bush fulfills the requirements not only of our domestic law but of international covenants and conventions, the Geneva Conventions on Torture, for instance. So we were essentially putting the case forward. Do we have a rule of law in this country, Or is the rule of law a sad hoax? Does the law actually apply to those high up in the system, to the rich